Okay.
Oh, what's the name of there? At the Drew Farm. You go with it.
We're ready.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cedric McCray.
Maybe we ask everybody.
Well, I was gonna offer that.
Yes. Please.
My name is Cedric McCray, Tampa CRA Director, and I see several familiar faces in our capacity crowd. Just, if you are here to discuss anything stadium related, you are in the wrong place. Just say that. But the emphasis and purpose of this meeting this evening is to simply discuss some of the proposed changes and provide updates to the community related to our commercial grants. And we have two of our staff members, team members, Ms. Martinez, who's no stranger to the folks in the room, and Ms. Dee Reed, will be providing those updates, and we'll be able to solicit any questions that you all have at the tail end of the presentation. And then if you have anything written you'd like to share, there are sheets at your table or your seat to provide any questions that you may want us to look into as a staff. But feel free to move up to be a little closer. We can get closer, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Martinez and Ms. Reed.
I think he's coming up, so I'll wait.
Can you see if we take the lights and see the speed button? We get that thing, well, package thing, you know, but I think it's one of the lights stay on somewhere when you hit down. Then you can see that, yeah, see that?
Better?
Yeah, you can see that, that's not the same.
All right, good evening. Can you all hear me in the back? Okay. All right, I'm Dee Reed, as Director McCray mentioned. I'm the Economic Development Coordinator for the Tampa CRA. All right, so we are here this evening because there are two items that came up since the April 22nd workshop that is going to be incorporated in the update that we are going to present to the CRA board on June 11th. And they are related to the commercial special projects and commercial development grants. And so while we understand that it was short notice for this workshop, these changes came about over the last 2 weeks, and staff worked extremely hard to get this scheduled so that we can at least present these updates to the community and give you an opportunity to give your feedback before we present this to the CRA board. So of the two updates, the first would be a grant name change that will be reflected in the policy document, as well as the necessary grant descriptions. The second change is related to CRA's use of community benefit agreements, or CBAs. So for the first item, staff recognizes the amount of frustration that seems to arise in relation to the pre-development grant. We believe that much of that frustration stems from the misconception that the grant was intended to function as some envisioned the East Tampa pilot pre-development grant to function. In an effort to establish the necessary separation of those grants, staff is proposing to rename the existing grant the Commercial Design Grant. And our second update would be regarding the CBA. So given the short time frame in which the workshop was scheduled, Attorney Shepherd was not able to attend, neither in person or virtually. So, however, he was happy to provide a video explaining his legal opinion. So I'm going to pause here and we'll view his video, and then I'll come back and give the rest of the presentation.
to you about community benefits agreements and the issues that I have with them based on experiences on other CRAs that I represent. But first, let me explain why I'm sitting here in a very casual looking outfit, semi unshaven and with a cap on my head. I'm up in Maine on a fishing trip, and that is why I don't look exactly lawyerly, and I hope you forgive that, but I know this was a timely project that needed to be done right away. So I'm recording this at Ms. Reed's request, so I can send it to her and help educate you all on the issue. So what is a community benefits agreement? Well, the way I describe it is it's a cherry on top of a sundae. And sundae is the one we create with our grant programs. We have multiple grant programs, but the bottom line is our community benefits agreement. Part of it is if the requests are over certain threshold, and right now that threshold is $500,000, then the developer or property owner is required to do a community benefits agreement, something extra for the benefit of the community that enhances the community in which they are doing the project in some way, shape, or fashion. The problem that I have with those things is that the unspoken truth is that if you know that at the threshold of your grant, let's say you're going to get $600,000, you know you've triggered the community benefits agreement requirement, and now you have to do some other project, then you will most likely base right into your project budget the additional cost of the community benefit. So in an ultimate effect, it's the CRA, not the developer or property owner who's paying for this community benefit. Essentially, we are paying for it by giving them a grant, which buried within it is enough money to cover whatever their community benefit will be. Can you prove it in every case? Of course you can, but it's very easy, and anyone who knows and understands construction knows this is true, to vary costs that will be used for other things within a construction project that's of a significant size. And obviously $500,000 and above is pretty significant. And those things are always relative to the size of whatever the community benefits agreement. So if you were doing a $500,000 project and going to spend an estimated $25,000 or $30,000 on a community benefit, that would be easy money to hide within that kind of budget. And of course, as the budget goes up, so does the amount of the community benefit typically. So problem number one is dishonest or disingenuous to say that the developer or property owner is out doing this out of their money, when in fact the reality is, in all likelihood, they're just increasing the amount in their budget project, whether it's affordable housing, commercial building rehabilitation, whatever it might be, enough to cover this additional cherry on the sundae, as I call it. And so transparency, problem number one. Problem number two is in the cases where I've seen this happen in other communities, the developer takes all the credit for being the person who brought their benefit. They're the ones who do the ribbon cutting. They're the ones who get the credit for being great corporate citizens or whatever they are. And so that's a problem. And it's a problem because, particularly in Tampa, we know there's a real sensitivity to CRA not getting enough credit for the things that it spends its money on for the benefit of the communities that it serves. And so having a community benefit agreement that makes it look like the developer or property owner is actually doing the good work, when it's the money of the CRA that's allowing the good work to be done, is a problem in and of itself. And last but not least, one of the problems with these community benefit agreements in other communities that we're going to try to remedy here in Tampa is that if you cannot spend money as a CRA directly to do a certain thing, then you can't spend that money indirectly. So if a CBA is being done by a developer at our requirement, but it is on a project that we couldn't spend our money on, say, the job creation program. Nothing wrong with the program, but it's not something that we're allowed to spend money on as a CRA. Let's say it's a special event of some sort. They're gonna put on a concert for the community. Let's call that a community benefit. Well, it's a benefit, but it's not something that we as a CRA are allowed to spend money on. And if we couldn't spend money on it directly, then we shouldn't be spending that money, can't be spending that money indirectly through a third party to accomplish the same result. It would be essentially channeling funds to a resource that we know is going to be used in an unlawful fashion when it comes to the usage and spending of debt. So those are the problems that I see with it. And those are the things that I alerted your staff to, when we started talking about how we can make our program align with the city's program and build a better mousetrap. And so with that, Mrs. Reed and her team will explain to you what they've come up with that I believe will help us solve the problem on a go-forward basis and have a community benefits program that is both transparent and lawful and gives credit where credit is due to the CRA that funds it. All right? Thanks for listening.
All right. All right, so now I'll explain the differences in the two types of CDA, the two existing CDAs. So the CRA CDA, which was approved in June of 2021, is required for projects receiving, can you hear me? Okay, is required for projects receiving $500,000 or more in CRA funding. It requires negotiations directly between the developer and a community organization such as a registered neighborhood association. CRA staff and the board do not participate in those negotiations. There's no CRA representation required, even when the CRA's funding represents the entire public contribution. And there's no assurances that the funds are being spent solely on eligible CRA activities. The city CBA, which was approved in January of 2023, is required for projects receiving $1 million or more in city funding when the combined project value is at least $5 million. So just to be clear, that city contribution or the city funding is a combination of CRA funds and city funds. And that same combination is used to determine the value. So the city CBA also requires negotiations, but it will be between the developer and the city appointed advisory council. It does not apply to some smaller projects that receive a significant amount of public funding. CRA staff and board still do not participate in the negotiations. No required CRA representation is, no CRA representation is required. There again is still no assurances that funds are being spent on eligible CRA activities, and the final agreement is approved by the city council. So with the CRA attorney's suggestion to repeal the CRA's CBA, staff's proposal is to require a community benefits as a requirement for any funding at $1 million or more. So the only grant that this would apply to would be the commercial development grant, because those grants are for requests of $1 million or more. So commercial development applicants would specifically have to identify the community benefit from the district's community redevelopment plan that is being provided with their project. The benefit must be a proportionate amount in relation to the funds being requested, and it must remain in place for the entire term of the grant agreement restricted covenants. In addition, permanent recognition of the CRA's contribution must be installed. So the benefits of this approach are that the community benefit would be identified through the district's community redevelopment plan. The Community Advisory Committee would have the opportunity to recommend community benefits to be presented to the board along with their recommendation on the overall application. The CRA board would determine the required community benefit. They would establish the acceptable benefit value and approve the acceptable associated recognition. CRA staff would ensure all proposed benefits are eligible expenditures. The community benefit commitments would be incorporated into the grant agreement. The CRA would receive appropriate and permanent recognition for its funding contribution to the project. And the final agreement would be approved by the CRA board. So to address the CBA issues, the board has three options. Option one would be to take no action. The CRA's CBA will continue to be required for awards of $500,000 or more, with the developer negotiating with the community organization. And the city CBA will continue to be required for awards of $1 million or more, with an overall project value of $5 million, and the developer negotiating with the city-appointed advisory council and the city council approving the agreement. Again, the concerns with this option, as expressed by Attorney Shepherd, are that there will continue to be no CRA participation in the negotiations. There will still be no required CRA representation. There will still be no assurances that funds are spent on eligible expense. And some developers will be required to execute both CBAs. So some examples of projects and how the CBAs would be applied are whether a project value or whether the project is receiving $1.6 million or $800,000 from the CRA. I'm sorry, whether a $1.6 million project receives $800,000 from the CRA or $1 million from the CRA, the project will only be required to execute the CRA's CBA. A $5 million project receiving $1 million from the CRA, the project will be required to execute both the CRA and the city's CBA. A $5 million project receiving $900,000 from the CRA and $1 million from the city would be required to execute both the CRA and the city's CBA. A $10 million project receiving only $400,000 from the CRA and $600,000 from the city would only be required to execute the city's CBA. Option two would be to repeal the CRA's CBA and keep the city's CBA as it is today. The concerns with this option are large CRA contributions to smaller projects will not require a community benefit. Again, there will be no CRA participation in the negotiations. And there will still be no assurances that funds are spent on eligible expense. Some examples would be a $4 million project receiving $4 million from the CRA. The project will be required to execute no CBA. A $5 million project receiving $1 million from the CRA would require the city CBA with no required CRA involvement. A $5 million project receiving $900,000 from the CRA and $1 million from the city would require the city CBA with no required CRA involvement. Option 3 would be to repeal the CRA's CBA, remove the CRA's funding from the city's CBA, and update the commercial development grant requirements. The advantages of this option are the CRP identifies the community benefits that would be required. The CAC has the opportunity to recommend community benefits. The CRA board can require specific community benefits and determine the value of the acceptable benefits. CRA staff will ensure funding eligibility. The community benefit becomes a part of the grant agreement, and the CRA approved recognition of its contribution would be required. Some examples of this would be a $2 million project receiving $1.6 million from the CRA. The community benefit is going to be required as a part of the CRA grant approval process. A $5 million project receiving $1 million from the CRA and $500,000 from the city. The community benefit will be required as a part of the CRA grant approval process, and no city CBA would be required. Now, a $5 million project that receives $1 million from the CRA and $1 million from the city would be required to execute the community benefit would be required as a part of the CRA's grant approval process for the $1 million received from the CRA. And the city CBA would be required only based on the $1 million they received from the city. So if the CRA board votes in favor of option 3 at their June 11th regular board meeting, they will need to determine their required value of the benefit in relation to the requested amount. Staff will return to the board in July to repeal the CRA's CBA, and the CRA attorney will work with the city attorney to remove CRA funds from consideration in the city's CBA process. At the June board meeting, in addition to the CBA decision, the board will have 2 additional items to discuss and decide as a board. When staff presents the commercial special projects and commercial development grant applications, whether the board prefers, they will have to decide whether they prefer to have them presented by type or by district. They will also have to decide how they wish to approach evaluations for each district. Do they want to hear all of the requests for each district, discuss and evaluate them as a board, and then take a vote on each application? Or if they want to evaluate and vote on each request as they hear them. So this concludes my presentation. As mentioned, Attorney Shepherd was not available to attend. So if you have any legal questions, we've provided the comment forms that are on the table for you to document any of your legal questions. Make sure you provide your email address, and at the end of the workshop, staff will collect all of the forms, we'll compile all of those questions into a single document, and we will forward them to the attorney for answers. Once we receive those answers, we will then email all of the questions and answers to all of the email addresses provided, as well as upload the document to the webpage. So with that, we'll open the floor for any questions. If there are any questions.
Well, I've got plenty of questions.
Okay.
Okay, let me just say this. I'm not gonna go into legal because, like I say, up my weight for me calling. Listen to me, okay? Out of anybody in this room, anybody? You get this on the recording? Listen to me, okay? This is very complex and very confusing. Again, Very complex. I'm hearing $1 million here, $5 million there. I ain't seen no piece of paper showing no money. I'm taking slides to show what was presented physically that you can see. Well, you know, when you're quoting like 1 million, here's an example. This should be like the slide say, example. 1 million here, 5 million here, blah, 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 blah. Another slide to show all of that. That is just too much for anybody, including an engineer like me and a professional, to absorb in 10 minutes. However, here's my problem with this whole approach. Probably the only person in the room that has negotiated community benefit agreements and have direct experience, both with the Rays over in St. Pete, when they were trying to get something over there, was involved in that, with Gypsy Gallardo and people in St. Pete, Rome Yard, community benefit agreement. That's an extra piece of paper that was not required by the developer. It was something that they volunteered to do. Don't apply to none of that up there and can get more done than all of that up there. 3, I've been involved with the community benefit agreement for, well, let me back up. I sit on the Community Benefit Advisory Council. So I don't think anybody else sitting in here sit on it. Okay, I haven't gone through a full-fledged community benefit agreement requirement by the city ordinance and completed it successfully. The first one and the other one that was done was Gas Works with Darrell Shaw. Got that done following the ordinance. They received CRA funding by the millions. Just finished last night, before I came back over here for the True Parts CRA, last night, as a member of the Community Benefits Advisory Council, we went over J.P. Newman's chip in, I call it, Sanchez and Higher Building Community Benefit Agreement meeting that's required by the ordinance, required for anything, and it was $5 million. Very controversial because the CRA Advisory Committee said 2.5 million. When it got the board, they jacked it up to 5 million. So the board added that additional money, CRA money from East Tampa. Okay. And that's CRA money. This issue of, well, I don't agree with Shepard at all. He needs to stay up there and stay fishing because he's fishing on the wrong thing. He's sitting here saying that we shouldn't spend any CRA money in a project. That's nonsense. First of all, the city's community redevelopment plans are antiquated. The one for East Tampa is still 2004 close. I don't think the CRA board or anybody else has adopted an updated one yet. I asked that question. They said it's still 2004 CRP. I ain't talking about no strategic plan. The CRP just for East Tampa still ain't done and updated accepted by the CRA board. If I'm wrong, they didn't know, Cedric. It's on the agenda, so it's still out of date. So when this gets launched, okay, if you launched it right now, okay, you'd be looking at 2004 CRP, and that don't apply no more. That community's changed. Another example, West Tampa, that I know well. We're 2015. It's 10 years, 11 years old, out of date. We're updating it, having a meeting just Monday night to update it. The consultant to start the process, and maybe in another 6 or 7 months, we might have a final document to be approved. If we wait long enough, we'll have 3 new people up there on city council. Maybe we'll get something done right here. Okay, so my thing about it is that I think that the way that the ordinance reads, because that ain't a CRA board, that's the city of Tampa adopted that ordinance, but refers that if you spend $5 million of CRA money, and I think that was the right way the lawyers did it, that you need to have a community benefit agreement. And it works. We did it on Gas Works, and he's talking about, well, you know, it's got to be, the guy's gonna have a $400,000 project, but they're gonna jack up and make it $600,000 because they got to include in there to do the community benefit agreement. So what? The city ain't going over there fixing the street, the surrounding stormwater issue, infrastructure issues. So if we got a company that's doing a development and they're gonna add additional money to take care of benefit, something in the CRP that the city ain't doing with CRA funds that are sitting there drawing interest because they're not being implemented fast enough, then why not? So that think about the company is gonna add into that. I want them to please do it because the city ain't doing nothing with it. They're taking too long to implement. But if we got projects, the guy says, hey, I'm gonna have this amount and I got this line item for this benefit, blah, 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 because it's prescriptive. If you're depending on what tier you are, if you know anything about community benefit agreements, if anybody in here went through following the whole procedure like me up the last night. So, I'm gonna stop right there because I think the way the city does it now, there ain't nothing wrong with it. But I'm letting these clowns at the CRA go ahead and do what they're gonna do, because I guarantee as soon as I get rid of at least 4 of them up there, by May 1st, 2027, we're gonna rewrite all this again the right way. That's all I want to say for the record at this point. Nothing against the staff, nothing against y'all, but this attorney is giving us information, and setting us backwards. With this nonsense. He's sitting up there fishing, okay, on some fishing hole in New England somewhere, and I'm sitting down here going to community benefit agreement. He ain't never been to a community benefit agreement in his life. And he's wrong. I sit on the CRA at West Ham, and I'm in that large number. So to say that the CRA ain't involved is not true. I am a member of a CRA. So CRA is sitting on something. May not be West Hampton, but it's East Hampton, it's a CRA. So that's a erroneous statement there. That people, and how do you know the people that the city is picking? Because you got to pick local folks for that local project. Taking how Sanchez, what we did for Gas Works, Ybor City. Okay, some of them people I think was on the CRA. So to say that when he says CRA, he's just talking about the board. Or is he talking about CC members? We're part of the CRA. We got to go take fingerprints. We got to get a background check. We don't get paid for that. They do. We don't. So, I just disagree with dismantling something that don't need to be dismantled. Because at the point that it gets to the city ain't listening, either we better have a new mayor, new people on city council, or I'm gonna get the boys in Tallahassee called up my attorney general, investigate all this. Because it's not reasonable. We're doing fine what we're doing. There's nothing wrong with what we're doing. Matter of fact, there is no evidence that what we're doing now, utilizing the ordinance that are on the books, has a problem. Where's the problem at? Why are we doing this? They ain't even been but 2 in the history of the city of Tampa following the ordinance. The first one was Gas Works. We just started the second one. I'm gonna give you another one. Government buildings. Strash Summer, Museum of Art, Quarry, Tampa Theater. They got community benefit agreements. Guess what? They don't get negotiated by nobody on the Community Benefit Advisory Council. No input whatsoever, because the ordinance say they exempt government buildings. It's left up to the EBO office in the city to negotiate the community benefit agreement for the Strass, because I got to call it this. Somebody want to know what it is. I got copies of it, but they have community benefit agreements. So what are you going to do about those? And they got 22 million of CRA funds on the downtown partnership. The Strass did, but it's a government building. It's exempt. So that he ain't looked at their ordinance in detail like me, nor has he practiced that. He just talking from some other jurisdiction that don't have the CBA ordinance like we do. That I hate to say it, but Councilman Gould, he's the one push for CR community benefit agreements, specifically utilizing when we're giving these big grant dollars community CRA funds. That's how it all really started, and that's what integrates into it the mention of CRA funding. It really was meant for CRA funding, not just for city projects, period. That was the real reason it came up, because we saw that people getting these grants, getting mega grants. So we gave 50 million to do infrastructure, which CRA money is for. We needed the streets and the sewer modified. CRA money is for that. As a matter of fact, It was a loan, I think he had to pay it back. I mean, well, it's a reimbursement, put it that way. They had to put the money up and then they get it back over a period of time. Not like the raise the money up front, they ain't finna do no, spend their money and then get a reimbursement. So I'm just gonna say, that's the other thing is the buildings that are getting salary funds that don't fall under none of this you're talking about. Because you just said 5 million, so I just want to tell Mr. Fisherman up there that he need to consider what he gonna do about government buildings. He's talking about private development, private buildings, but what about government buildings? I'm done.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Anyone else?
So I'll try to address some of.
You
the
ain't got
comments.
to just
No,
step this.
Well, for the rest of the people in the room, I would like to provide
Not
some additional
self-styled.
information. So in terms of whether government buildings would be included, all city requests have to go through the commercial development grant. So it does include them as proposed. Now, the board, again, does have the option if, when we present in June, if they decide they want to make an exemption, then that's a decision that the board would make. But as it's proposed, it would include city buildings as well. As you mentioned that the attorney said that, and correct me if I misunderstood what you said, but it sounded like you said that he said that we should not be funding projects. Is that what you said?
No, he said that we should not be funding, he was showing an example of how if you had a $400,000 project, that they would put extra money in to pay for the benefits. Well, hell, that's what the CRA money is for, benefits. It's for getting stuff done in the community. So what if somebody added additional money to get things in the community that need to be done that's in the CRP? Sidewalks, stormwater, piping.
Okay, so this
Infrastructure.
proposal does not eliminate the ability or the requirement for those things to be done.
But he was alleging that that would lead to people getting things done in their proposal. They'll be adding to the contract. And he don't know nothing about construction. He know the engineer, no contractor. He's a lawyer. So he don't know nothing about what we doing. And people add stuff into contracts as they find out what they need. And if the community benefit agreement says you need to do this, well, guess what? That costs money to do it. So what are you trying to say, that you want to just spend their money? The whole idea is these people get $1 million grants and the whole grant is out of CRA money. What you talking about?
Okay, so can I finish?
You like yourself?
So what he's not, again, he's not saying that we eliminate that. What he is saying is that, yes, they incorporate the cost of that benefit in their request. This process does not prevent them from doing that. What it does is require them to acknowledge and recognize that the CRA contributed to that benefit.
Okay, but the way he set it up there, and I got it on video, he was making it look like the guy was adding some fat to it, and they wanted the money to come out the pocket of the developer, not out the CRA. That's the way I heard it, and I'm gonna play it back to my attorneys and let them know this is what I'm hearing.
Okay, well, to clarify what he is trying to
Well, he
accomplish.
ain't just clarify, so.
Well, I'm gonna clarify based on the conversations that we had, that the intent is to address the concerns that the board members have expressed, that a lot of our projects that are funded by the CRA, when they're completed, the credit goes to either the developer or the city, and that there's no recognition that the CRA contributed to that
That's not
project.
true.
So this is an
Who said
attempt
that? The board?
to ensure that the CRA is recognized for their
That's
contribution.
not true.
So that is what his intent.
That's what the board said. I'm gonna ask the board, say the board, you're telling me that the board members who are city council are saying that they don't get no recognition for CRA dollars going into the community?
So, Mr. Robinson, I don't want to get into a
That
debate.
ain't a debate.
I'm trying
You
to
just
make,
state a fact, I state a fact. The fact was you said the board said that they don't get recognition. That's not true. But let's move on. I told you to
okay,
move
so
on.
that was the clarification for what the attorney was saying in the video. Is there any other questions that anyone else has that I can answer? No, okay. Ms. McCray, Do you have anything that you want to say before we close out?
We appreciate everyone that's here in attendance this evening.
For this year.
This is it. So, the information, as customary, will be on the website, and the discussion and presentation to the CRA board will be at the June 11th meeting.
Good job, be that.
And I know,
Can I ask a question?
yes, ma'am.
Unrelated to what we're talking about here. Is the CRA board voting on the policy to prevent CRA CAC members from applying for funding for projects? Is that being voted on?
So that is not a part of the presentation. There's nothing that the CRA would vote on that makes that change. What is triggering that is the city's ethics code. So, I believe it was in May, the attorneys, was it? May?
February.
February.
Supposed to be discussed, and it was continued to October of 26.
What I'm talking about, where they presented the memo saying that they think that, or their recommendation is that there's an exception that's placed with the city's ethics code that would remove CAC members from that component. That would solve the problem, but it has to actually be done. So as of now, we're just waiting on the city to take that official action. And once they make that change to the ethics code, then that would allow CAC members to apply.
Really? I got a different opinion on that one since you brought it up. Okay, I wasn't gonna say it, but that's my main issue here tonight, okay? I want to say it. See, other people concerned. The lady from Drew Park was concerned last night, right, Mr. Fernandez? Is it Fernandez? Mr. Nunez, you back then?
Yes.
Then she brought up had that, then the word, and she was told that it's still under review. It ain't final yet. Okay? All right, and I don't want to bring it up, but since you brought it up, I'm very familiar with the city's ethics code, and they have moved that out. And that to me is a equal protection issue, that you're now allowing an existing CAC member, because these grants don't come to us unless they're over $1 million. They don't come to the CAC for a review. Man, right here approval. According to the policy, this man right in. So how am I not being able to participate, ma'am? You need to take my card. Because I know a whole bunch about that. I'm about ready to call James Upmeyer in here to get it resolved. Because we don't have anything, we're sitting here volunteering. And we're saying, hey, I got property, I want to help the slum and blight issue. I want to create affordable housing for people. So I sit on a committee that I don't vote on what I got. Case in point, I'm gonna shut up on that. I know you won't go. And I'm not messing with you. I love you, Miss Reed. I just want to tell you that. But I'm gonna do what I got to do. Okay, I've put plenty of people in federal prison and told them I love them. Listen to me. So what I'm saying is, here's the way I see it. We don't vote on it when it comes in front of us anyway. We don't, it's an administrative decision at that grant level on the 500, which is, anybody get the whole 5. The other thing is, not only is it below the threshold of a CAC reviewing, I mean, we had to review not the Jackson House, the Walter Smith Libraries, and we had to review that. So Mr. Smith couldn't sit on our committee, and he just stayed off until that got done. But he has the right to come back now. It's over. But here's the deal. Here's the other one. City council, I give an example. When there's a conflict of interest, and I will call names, Bill Carson sit there and say, oh, my company, Tucker Hall, and I call names, is providing public relations work for them, and I'm gonna fill out the form, and I'm finna walk out the room, and I'm not gonna discuss it, and I'm not gonna vote on it, because it's the amount, in his opinion, he thinks it's a conflict of interest. That's what he does. He don't have to resign from the city council. He don't have to, not participate later on anything. He just get out the room and sign the form, says the conflict by, and the other people there make the decision. Why can't we do that? See, this is equal protection under the law. So if city council, including the CRA board, has a conflict on something that comes before them, say he was getting some grant money for his building over there in Evo City at Tucker Hall, he just recused himself, which is what you do. You don't quit city council. You don't quit being on the CRA board, do you? They want us to quit the board. They want us to resign and walk away. Well, I ain't. I'm taking this here all the way. So that's the answer to that. So get that, give him a card and we can talk about it later offline.
So 3 corrections. 1, Director McCray does not approve any grants. All grants are either standards have already been approved by the board, and as long as the application or the project meets those qualifications and there's funding, it'll be approved. Number 2, there are grants that come to the CAC that are less than $1 million, and that will be special project grants. Those can be any dollar amount up to $1 million, and they are
I'm talking about commercial grants.
they are presented to the CAC, just like the commercial development grant.
I'm seeing.
And then the third item, I want to just say for the record, CRA staff completely feels the same way. We feel as though CAC members should be able to apply. We do not want you to have to leave the board. We, in the background, have been fighting from day one to get that.
Oh, really?
So this is not something that CRA staff is trying to implement against CAC members. However, there is language in policies in the CAC policy that we have to adhere to the city's codes. One of those codes is the ethics code, and there is a language in the ethics code. And if you go back and listen to the council meeting, or you read the memo that the city attorney presented to the council, they identified that there is an ethics conflict. So they've also identified a resolution, and CRA staff is waiting for them to complete that resolution. The minute that that resolution is completed, there is already language ready. The document is sitting in draft form that will be presented to the board that would then allow CAC members to apply for grants.
Well, let me say this, okay, because I don't believe that, because Jim Bryan wrote a memo for a CAC member chair, Natasha Goodby, saying it's not a conflict for her to get a tree grant, okay? So that's not true. There's evidence of that, and I got a copy of it. Darryl Shaw with Evo, what is it called? Evo, you know the name. He's Casa Evo, lady was sitting on there. He got Tyler Hudson to write a letter, and then they still went ahead, okay, and let them get the grant money. Same
They
thing.
have an application in our office that is sitting right now
Well-
because we are waiting on this action.
Well,
I can't speak for
well,
what
let me
anyone
say
else did.
The way that I'm gonna approach it is I'm gonna file a request to the ethics board committee to resolve, because as a sitting member of the CAC, you have the right to ask the ethics committee to rule a decision on whether it can and all its weight round.
That is absolutely true, and we encourage you to do
So I
so.
will. I'm just
We
waiting
encourage
on,
you to
I'm
do
just
so.
giving y'all all due process and giving y'all all this exhaust your administrative remedies, and then you're gonna see what I'm gonna do.
So for everyone else listening, those projects that were named were old projects that were approved, and absolutely, I can't speak to those. But once I'm looking at something, if there is a policy that tells me I can't do it, I will not be doing it. So as of now, once you learn better, you do better. And so once the policy is in front of me and it tells me there's a conflict, until that policy is changed, my team will not process an
Well,
application.
I'm not asking you to do that. I understand that the policy is, it needs to be
Can I please
revised.
finish my statement?
You finish all you want,
Okay,
but I
thank
think you was finished to me.
So the minute, like I said, once that is corrected, and I'm speaking to you because you asked the question. Once that's corrected, we will happily process applications from CAC members.
When is it gonna be corrected?
You have to ask the city attorney's
But don't
office.
problem, I'll get with him in tomorrow,
Thank you.
Monday.
Any other questions?
Here goes my card.
Well,
And the
once
email.
again, thank you for joining us for the discussion.
We need
And
to get
we
together.
look forward to seeing everyone real soon. Thank you.
Thank you.